She said they were just old letters, yellowed and musty, cluttering up the corner of the attic. "You've had them for decades, Margaret. Honestly, it's just junk." I watched from the kitchen doorway as she dropped the box into the black trash bag and tied it off like it was nothing. That box had sat on the cedar shelf since before her husband, my son, was born. And now it was gone. Just like that. The trash bag hit the bin with a careless thud. Laura turned around, brushed her hands together, and smiled at me like she'd done me a favor. "You'll feel so much lighter," she said, stepping around me to wash her hands, already moving on to the next chore on her mental list. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Not when it would just spark one of her exasperated sighs or thin-lipped smiles. "We're trying to make space," she'd say. "It's not personal, Margaret." But it always was. She'd been making space since they moved in. At first, it was small things. My baking pans accidentally replaced, the kitchen towels swapped, the quilt my mother made folded and put away in the hall closet. Then the furniture in the front room was rearranged to open up the energy. My armchair didn't fit anymore, she said. It made the space feel off. So I moved it into the bedroom and sat by the window instead. I used to own every corner of this house. Now I lived in the corners. That morning was cold. A wind had picked up early, rattling the bare branches outside the kitchen window. October, with its rusted skies and sharp light, always brought me back to those early days with Tom. We'd moved into this house in the fall of '73, a year after the wedding. Bought it in cash, too. Tom never trusted banks, said paper could lie. But a deed in your hands was the only real thing in this world. He stored everything in that attic box, labeled it himself. Important. I remember the thick envelope he sealed with red wax. "Keep this safe, Mags," he'd told me, slipping it into the box with the rest. "It's not for now. It's for when you need to remember who owns what." I hadn't opened that box in years. I thought I had time. Laura left for yoga a little after noon, calling out that she wouldn't be back until 3. "I told David to get takeout," she said, as she slipped on her expensive fleece. "There's no need for you to cook tonight." Her voice had that chirpy edge she used when pretending she wasn't telling me what to do. After she left, I stood at the back door for a long time, staring at the bins by the fence. A black bag sat right on top, untied now, slightly opened at the edge. The wind must have caught it. I stepped outside, wrapped my sweater tighter around my shoulders, and opened the lid. It was there, the box, half crushed, its contents slumped like a broken spine. Most of the papers were soaked through, some torn. The letters, dozens of them, smeared beyond reading. And yet, underneath, I saw it. The envelope with the seal broken, its flap still folded neatly over the edges. The wax had cracked, but I knew it. My hands shook as I pulled it out, retreating back inside, away from the wind. At the kitchen table, I unfolded the brittle paper. There were 3 documents inside, still legible. Property records, land titles, all signed by Thomas Howell, notarized, dated 1974. Plots along Greenway Road. Back then, just fields. But now? I blinked, trying to steady my breath. I had thought they were just letters. So did Laura. But they were deeds. And they still had my name on them. The papers lay flat on the kitchen table, still damp at the edges, curling as they dried in the weak afternoon light. My hands rested beside them, palms open, as if I were afraid they might vanish if I blinked. For years, that envelope had lived quietly in the attic, unseen, unremarkable. Now it was the only thing in the house that felt truly alive. Thomas Howell. his name in bold, certain strokes of blue ink. My name beside his, Margaret E. Howell, in my smaller, neater handwriting. 3 parcels of land described in dense legal language, each one accompanied by a notary's stamp. Greenway Road, it read, total acreage, 6. I remembered those words now because Tom had said them out loud when he signed the documents. 6 acres, Maggie. Someday that'll mean something. Back then, Greenway was just a muddy stretch past the old sawmill. Tom had bought the land from a widower who wanted to move south. For the children, he'd said. Maybe David will build there one day. I'd laughed at the idea. We could barely afford roofing shingles then. The thought of owning extra land felt like a fantasy. But Tom was steady, methodical. He tucked those deeds away and told me to keep them safe. Never throw away what carries your name, he'd said. Paper keeps the world honest. Now, 48 years later, that paper was all I had left that proved anything belonged to me. The front door opened. David's voice echoed through the hallway, followed by the thud of his briefcase hitting the floor. Mom, you home? I slid the documents under a stack of magazines before he entered the kitchen. Yes, dear, I said, turning to the kettle as if I'd been busy. He loosened his tie, glancing around. Laura says you've been cleaning out the attic. Thank you. She's been on a minimalist kick. I smiled thinly. So I've noticed. He chuckled, missing the edge in my tone. She means well, you know. Tries to keep everything tidy. You hold on to too much stuff. Stuff. The word stung. Everything I owned, Tom's toolbox, the quilt, the old recipe cards, had been reduced to stuff. Maybe you're right, I murmured. Some things are worth keeping, though. He nodded absently, already scrolling through his phone. I'll be working late tomorrow. If you need groceries, just text Laura. She likes to manage that. Manage. Another word that landed heavy. They didn't even notice the way they spoke to me, as if I were one of the chores on Laura's list. After dinner, when they went upstairs to watch television, I returned to the table. I spread the documents again, careful not to tear them. I took out my reading glasses, adjusted the lamp, and began deciphering the small print. Each deed bore a registration number. I wrote them down on a notepad, tracing every line slowly, methodically. I wasn't entirely sure what to do next, but I knew one thing. I needed proof. Real proof. The next morning, while Laura was out and David at work, I called the county records office. A polite young woman answered. Good morning, Property Division. How may I help you? My name is Margaret Howell, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'd like to inquire about 3 parcels purchased in 1974 under that name. She asked for the numbers, typing quickly. There was a pause, a faint intake of breath. Yes, Mrs. Howell, the titles are still active, she said. All 3 are registered under your name and 1 co-owner, Thomas Howell, deceased. No transfers since 1974. My throat tightened. Active? They haven't been sold? No, ma'am. And just for your information, the Greenway corridor has been rezoned for residential development. The current assessed value is, she hesitated, quite significant. Would you like a formal appraisal mailed to you? Yes, I whispered. Please. When I hung up, the silence in the kitchen seemed enormous. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, marking the seconds between one life and another. I looked at the window, at the gray autumn sky, at the old maple tree Tom had planted out front. The world outside looked the same, but everything had shifted. I sat there for a long time, the receiver still warm in my hand, thinking of Tom. How certain he'd been that paper could keep a person safe. He'd been right all along. Laura had thrown away letters, but she hadn't managed to erase me. By evening, the envelope lay inside a new folder, sealed again, labeled in my own handwriting. Keep. Personal. Do not touch. I tucked it deep inside the drawer of my nightstand, behind the box of sewing threads. My fingers lingered on the edge a moment longer. Downstairs, I could hear Laura laughing into the phone, telling someone about her plans for the house once the old woman finally agreed to downsize. Her voice was bright, careless, full of confidence. I smiled to myself, a small, quiet smile no one could see. Let her plan. Let her tidy. Because for the first time in years, the paper was on my side. The kitchen had always been mine. For decades, it had smelled of cinnamon and roast chicken, of Tom's pipe tobacco drifting in from the porch. But now it smelled like lemon disinfectant and vanilla-scented candles that Laura insisted on buying in bulk. Neutral scents are better, she'd said once, tossing my old spice jars into the trash. Guests find clove and bay leaves overwhelming. I hadn't argued. Not then. But that morning, as I stood by the sink rinsing a single teacup, I realized something had changed. Not suddenly. Nothing in my life ever shifted in a single moment. But slowly, like the sea eroding a stone. Laura didn't ask anymore. She decided. She replaced. She cleared. And somehow, without realizing it, I had stopped pushing back. Until now. She came into the kitchen just before noon, tapping at her phone with her perfectly manicured nails, her lips moving silently as she dictated a message. She wore those tight gray workout pants and one of David's college sweatshirts, the sleeves pushed up to her elbows like she'd just been doing something important. She wasn't even looking at me when she spoke. "We need to go over the freezer," she said. "There's too much stuff." I said nothing, just dried my hands and sat down at the table. She opened the freezer door with a little sigh, then started pulling things out one by one. "What even is this?" She held up a foil-wrapped bundle. "Pot roast," I said. "Made it last month. David likes it." She wrinkled her nose. "It's got frost all over it. That's not safe anymore." It was vacuum sealed. She dropped it into the trash without another word. One by one, she tossed out small parts of my life. A bag of corn I froze from the market in July. A container of soup I'd made for a neighbor who never came to pick it up. A pie crust I'd rolled out and saved for a quiet day. "Honestly, Margaret," she said finally, closing the freezer door and wiping her hands, "we need to think long-term. This kitchen isn't efficient. Half of what's in here is expired or unlabeled." I looked at her, at the way she said "we" when she meant her, at the way her face tightened every time she looked at something she couldn't control. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not just irritation or bossiness, but something deeper. She wanted this house. She'd always wanted it. "It's an old space," she continued, now pacing lightly, her voice lighter than before, rehearsed. "You've done a beautiful job keeping it up all these years, but it's just not practical anymore. Not for the kind of lifestyle David and I have." "And what kind of lifestyle is that, exactly?" I asked, my voice even. She blinked, taken slightly off guard. "Well, you know, busy, modern, with more entertaining, more flow. We've talked about redoing the living room, maybe knocking out the wall to the den, turning the study into a nursery eventually." "Nursery?" I asked, though I already knew. She smiled, faintly. "Just thinking ahead." "Thinking ahead," I repeated. She poured herself a glass of sparkling water. always the same brand, the same flavor. David and I have been talking, Margaret. We really think it might be time for you to consider something a little easier. A retirement community, maybe. One of those independent living places. They have shuttle buses and activities and housekeeping. It could be good for you. You'd have your own space, of course. Privacy. I let the silence stretch between us. Let her hear the weight of her words. I see, I said finally. She mistook my stillness for compliance. Her shoulders relaxed, her tone brightened. We can help you look into places. There's one near the lake that's just lovely. Very modern. And they have memory care on site, just in case you ever... I won't be moving, I said. She blinked again. I'm sorry? I said, I repeated, folding the tea towel in my lap. I won't be moving. This is my house. There it was. The smallest flicker, annoyance, panic. She recovered quickly. Of course, I just thought maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere with support. David worries about you. The stairs, the garden. Things happen. Yes, I said quietly. Things do happen. She shifted her weight, setting her glass on the counter with a sharp little click. Well, it's something to think about. She left the room, her steps brisk and even, her silence louder than any argument. When the door shut behind her, I took the pie crust she'd nearly tossed from the trash and slid it back into the freezer. Still wrapped. Still perfectly fine. And then I walked into the den, opened my old file cabinet, and began to organize. Birth certificates. Tom's military papers. Tax records. The appraisal request would arrive soon. I needed everything ready. They thought I was old and soft and grateful. But they'd forgotten something essential. This house, every inch of it, was mine, and I wasn't about to let anyone renovate me out of it. The attic had always been his domain. Tom used to climb the narrow stairs 2 at a time, even after his knees started to go. No sense in keeping the good light down here, he'd say, pointing to the one dusty window up top that faced east. That's where the truth belongs. Someplace it can breathe. After his passing, I'd only gone up a few times. Once to put away his coats. Once to dig out the Christmas decorations. And once, years ago, to sit beside that cedar shelf and cry into the box marked important. Because it was the only place in the house where I still felt like he might come walking in. Now I stood there again, the boards groaning under my slippers, holding a flashlight in one hand and my breath in the other. The air smelled of dry wood and old paper, like time paused in 100 yellowing pages. I knew Laura had cleared out most of it last week, probably tossing anything that didn't shine or beep. But the far corner was too cramped for her, wedged between a beam and a sloped wall. That's where Tom had built the cabinet. Short, wide, bolted to the floor. He always said no storm could lift it. Said he'd buried a few things there that mattered too much to leave in the open. I pulled it open. Empty. I blinked. No files, no folders. Not even the cigar box where he kept his old letters. Just a few rusted nails and a dry oak leaf that must have blown in last year. But then I noticed something odd. Along the back panel, there was a fine line, barely visible. I ran my hand across it and felt the shallow groove of a seam, a hidden compartment. Tom always did love his secret compartments. He'd built one into the old hutch in the dining room, too, just big enough for a bottle of scotch and a folded $20 bill. For emergencies, he used to wink, or for Wednesdays. I knelt and pressed gently on the edge. The panel gave way with a soft pop. Inside, nestled between 2 pieces of old linen, was a small black case, leather, faded, but intact. My heart beat a little faster. I pulled it out and unzipped it. Deeds. Originals. The same 3 I'd recovered from the trash, only these were clean, sealed in plastic sleeves, untouched. And beside them, something else. A small brown envelope with my name written in Tom's hand. Maggie, just in case. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. No date, no greeting, just one line. If they forget who built this, remind them who paid. I closed my eyes and let the words settle into my bones. Back downstairs, I set the case on the dining table, poured myself a cup of weak coffee, and stared out the window. The leaves outside had turned fully now, golds and deep reds, a few clinging greens near the base of the elm. David used to rake them into piles and leap into them without warning. Once he broke his wrist doing it. Cried the whole ride to the hospital, then smiled through the cast as Tom signed it. That boy had joy in him once. I knew it. I'd held it. But time and Laura had pressed it out of him, bit by bit. That evening, after dinner, they sat together on the couch watching one of those glossy home renovation shows. A couple tearing out walls, installing waterfall countertops. Laura made small noises of approval every few minutes, the way someone does when they're dreaming aloud. "See that backsplash?" she said. "That would look amazing here." David nodded, not really listening. "We'd need permits to knock that out. Or Mom would." Laura chuckled. "Well, when she's ready to sell, I hope she lets us handle it. The bones are here. It just needs a vision." I sat in my chair by the window, knitting a scarf for no one in particular, and said nothing. My tea had long gone cold, but I held the cup anyway. My hands needed something to do. Laura turned toward me suddenly. "Margaret, have you ever thought about making a trust for the house?" I raised an eyebrow. "A trust?" "Yeah, like a family trust. You know, so everything's already in place when the time comes. It avoids probate, makes things cleaner. David could help you with the paperwork." David looked up, uncertain. "I mean, yeah, it's common. Just to simplify things." I nodded slowly. "Interesting idea." Laura smiled. "Just something to think about." "I'll think about it," I said. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Marvin Delaney, Tom's old apprentice. He was a lawyer now, small practice, quiet voice, sharper than anyone gave him credit for. "Mrs. Howell?" he said, surprised. "It's been a long time." "Marvin, dear," I replied, steady and calm. "I need your help, and I need it quietly." "I can do that," he said. "What's going on?" "I have 3 deeds, all in my name. I need them reviewed, appraised, and protected." He didn't ask why. We set a meeting for Friday morning, and when I hung up the phone, I sat in the dark, watching the hallway light spilling faintly across the floorboards. Let them dream their dream of a future kitchen. Let them measure for a nursery. They thought I was finished, but I had only just begun. The garbage bins sat at the end of the driveway, like silent judges. Green for waste, blue for recycling, and the black one in the middle, the one they reserved for things that don't matter anymore. That's where Laura had thrown the box. Not carefully, not with a second glance, just dropped it in like a spent tissue. That morning, the wind had picked up. The bin's lid had popped open, scattering scraps across the driveway. I spotted a corner of cardboard sticking out, sagging under the weight of early rain. Something about it made my chest tighten. I slipped out quietly, wearing my oldest cardigan and house shoes, hoping no one would see me. It was early enough. The air smelled like damp leaves and concrete. The box was still there, half smashed, its contents slumped. I knelt beside it, ignoring the cold seeping through the knees of my slacks. I reached in carefully, fingers brushing against crumpled paper and warped plastic. Most of it was gone, ruined by weather, torn where Laura had crammed things too tight. But deep beneath the mess, I found what I hadn't even known I was looking for: photographs. A few stuck together, watermarked and curling at the edges, but unmistakable. Tom and David in the backyard, a tiny sandbox between them. My mother's handwriting on a recipe card. A Christmas card from my sister, the envelope still sealed. And then, folded between two old letters, a document. Yellowed, soft around the corners but dry. Somehow untouched. It was one of the 3 deeds. The original. I froze. The other 2 were safe now, in the case I'd recovered from the attic. But this one, the 3rd, had been in that box, the one Laura threw away. Had I not come outside, had I not looked, this would have been lost. Millions, gone with the Wednesday trash. I stood slowly, knees aching, and pressed the document to my chest. She hadn't known. That much was clear. If she'd seen what it was, she'd have handled it differently, perhaps hidden it, or brought it to David, whispered something about old assets and redistribution. But to her, it was just another artifact from a woman whose story no longer mattered. That made it worse, somehow. I went inside and laid the paper flat on a towel, drying it gently with the edge of my sleeve. Once it was dry enough to touch without tearing, I slipped it into a folder with the others. When I arrived at Marvin's office on Friday, he was already standing at the door waiting. He hadn't changed much. Still thin, still dressed in those old-fashioned corduroy jackets, the ones that looked like they belonged in a library rather than a law firm. He ushered me into a small meeting room that smelled faintly of lemon oil and paper. I laid the deeds out in front of him, smoothing each one carefully. "Where did you get these?" he asked, studying the signatures. "My husband," I said. "He bought the land back in '74. Told me to keep them safe." Marvin adjusted his glasses, nodding slowly as he read. "Greenway parcels. Rezoned last year for mid-density residential. Developers have been circling for months. You're sitting on something very, very valuable, Margaret." I said nothing. He flipped through the documents. "These are clean, no liens, fully paid. In your name and his, and since he passed, full ownership transferred to you by survivorship clause. You could sell all 3 tomorrow and walk out of here with 7 figures." Still, I said nothing. He leaned back. "What do you want to do?" "I want them protected," I said. "No one else is to touch them. And I want everything in writing. Trusts, contingencies, the works. But not a word to my son. Not yet." Marvin raised his eyebrows but didn't argue. "You want to open a living trust in your name or name a beneficiary?" "I want it in my name," I said. "And when the time comes, it goes to my granddaughter, Ava. Not David, not Laura." "I can do that," he said quietly. "And I want to draft a will, a new one." "Of course." We spent the next 2 hours going over everything. I signed what I could, promised to return with identification for the trust registration, and left with a copy of the preliminary draft in my purse. Marvin walked me to the door, his voice kind but firm. "You're doing the right thing." "I know," I said. Back home, Laura greeted me with a smile far too bright. "We missed you at breakfast. David was wondering where you'd gone so early." "Errands," I said. "Just taking care of a few things." "Well, don't overdo it. she said, already heading toward the laundry room. "You've been moving slower lately. Maybe we should book you in for a checkup." I looked at her. Really looked. She stood there in her crisp blouse, her hair done just so, speaking to me like I was already halfway to gone. Like she was managing me the way she managed the grocery list or the holiday cards. "I feel just fine," I said, and turned toward the stairs. In my room, I opened the folder again and stared at the documents. Property, land, history. My name on each one like an anchor. They thought I was fading, but I was just getting started. Saturday afternoon, the house was empty. David had taken Laura to a winery an hour outside town, a belated birthday gift, he'd said. "You don't mind, do you, Mom?" he'd asked over toast that morning, already pocketing the car keys. I smiled and shook my head. "Of course not. You two enjoy yourselves." He kissed the top of my head in that automatic way children do when they're no longer thinking about you. Then they were gone. Their voices and laughter trailing behind them like ribbons in the wind. The silence afterward felt like a favor. I brewed tea slowly, choosing the good leaves this time, not the dusty bags Laura bought in bulk. I used the porcelain cup Tom gave me on our 25th anniversary, the one with a hairline crack no one could see unless they looked very closely. I carried it to the den, sat down with the folder Marvin had given me, and began reviewing everything again. The trust paperwork was precise, deliberate. My name on every page, the parcels listed clearly, and most importantly, Ava named as sole successor trustee. Not David. Ava, my only granddaughter, was 17. Bright, quiet, still soft in a way the world hadn't hardened yet. She came by after school sometimes, usually under some pretense. "Grandma, I'm doing a project on the 70s. Can I interview you?" Or, "We're baking in home ec. Can I borrow your apple pie recipe?" But we both knew she just wanted a quiet place, somewhere that still felt like home. Her parents never noticed how often she came. She'd been asking more questions lately, about the past, about the house, about her grandfather. One evening, last week, after Laura had left the room, she leaned across the table and whispered, "Why does Mom always call this their house when it's yours?" I smiled and said, "Because some people think talking louder makes them right." She laughed, but her eyes stayed on mine. "You're not going to let them take it, are you?" "No, sweetheart," I said. "I'm not." Now I sat reviewing the will Marvin had prepared, each word a soft act of resistance. I had updated everything, removed David as executor, named Ava as the one to carry it forward. The trust protected the land. The house remained under my name. No one could sell, renovate, or repurpose anything without going through me. And when I was gone, it wouldn't pass through David's hands at all. It would go to the only person in this family who still looked me in the eye. I made copies of every document and sealed them in a manila envelope. Then I placed it at the back of my bedroom drawer, behind Tom's flannel shirts. Still folded, still smelling faintly of tobacco and oak. The original folder stayed locked in the small metal safe in the hall closet. I changed the combination that afternoon, wiping the dial clean when I was done. They would never think to look. That evening, Ava came by unexpectedly. Her hair was pulled into a high, messy bun. She wore her father's old hoodie and leggings covered in cat hair. I opened the door before she knocked. "Grandma," she said, smiling, "can I hang out for a bit?" "Always." She dropped her backpack by the sofa and kicked off her shoes. "They're at some winery. I was supposed to go to Dad's sister's for dinner, but I told them I had homework." "You're a terrible liar," I know, she grinned, but I had a better offer. We made grilled cheese and tomato soup, the kind that's mostly butter and memory. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eating from a tray, watching reruns of old shows she pretended not to like. At some point, her smile faded, and she turned to me, serious. Are you okay, Grandma? Lately I feel like, I don't know, like something's going on. I looked at her, at the softness in her face, the sharpness in her gaze. She reminded me of myself at 17, before Tom, before David, before the long years of patience that hardened into habit. I'm better than I've been in a long time, I said. Just making sure everything's in place. Ava tilted her head. In place for what? For when the time comes, I said. She was quiet a moment. Then she whispered, Are they trying to make you leave? I didn't answer. She already knew. Her eyes filled, and she looked away quickly, pretending to fiddle with her napkin. If you ever need anything, she said, like anything at all, money, help, someone to drive you somewhere, I mean it. You can call me. I won't tell them. I know, sweetheart, I said, and I'm not going anywhere. Later, when I walked her to the door, she paused and turned back. You're not like them, she said. You never were. I watched her walk down the path, her back straight, her shoulders strong. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Let David buy wine and talk renovations. Let Laura count square footage and dream about open floor plans. They could plan the future all they wanted. But they'd forgotten one thing. The present still belonged to me. I waited until Monday morning to make the next move. After David left for work, tie slightly crooked, coffee sloshing in a reusable cup, and Laura disappeared to her Pilates class, I gathered everything: the notarized trust documents, the updated will, the copies of the deeds, and a checklist Marvin had given me. It was time to make it official. The bank was quiet at that hour, just the hum of the heater kicking on and the low murmur of two tellers gossiping behind the counter. I was the only one in the waiting area. A young man in a navy blazer approached, barely older than Ava. Mrs. Howell, I'm Aaron. You're here to open a trust account? I nodded. That's right, my attorney called ahead. He glanced at the folder in my hands, then smiled professionally. Of course. Let's get you set up. The process was thorough. I signed documents slowly, carefully. Aaron explained every line, but I already knew what most of them meant. I may have been old, but I wasn't foolish. For years, Tom had made me balance the books for his business. If something happens to me, Mags, he used to say, you'll need to know where every dollar is going. Now, every dollar of mine would be exactly where I wanted it, locked into an account under my name, tied directly to the trust, accessible only by me, and later by Ava. Aaron handed me the final document to sign. This confirms the transfer of $140,000 into the trust account, tied to the future sale of the Greenway parcels. I signed. Would you like online access? No, I said firmly. Paper statements, to this address only. He hesitated, then nodded. Absolutely. By noon, everything was done. The deeds secured, the money protected, the future rewritten in my own handwriting. I left the bank with my spine straighter, my stride steadier. On the way home, I stopped by the post office and mailed a sealed envelope to Marvin with a second set of signed copies. Then I dropped by the bakery and bought myself a lemon tart. Small victories deserved small celebrations. Back at home, the house was still quiet. I made tea, set the tart on a plate, and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I started writing things down, Not legal things, but human things. What Tom used to say about land, the way he folded his receipts into squares, the color of the sky the day we first saw that house on Maple Lane. I didn't know why, exactly. I just wanted someone to remember things the right way. The front door opened just after 1. Laura came in, talking into her phone. And she's still here, of course. I mean, she's sweet. But it's like, how long can someone just sit on a house like that? She stopped when she saw me in the kitchen. "Mom," she said, surprised, "you're home?" "I live here," I said calmly. She laughed awkwardly. "Right. I just thought you had an appointment today." "I did. Took care of some paperwork." "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfectly fine." She stood there for a moment, the phone still in her hand. I could see the thoughts clicking behind her eyes. She always knew when I was being deliberate, and it made her uneasy. Later that afternoon, David called from work. "Hey, Mom," he said casually. "Laura said you were at the bank?" "I was." "Everything okay?" "Yes." Pause. "What kind of paperwork?" "Just updating things. Trusts, wills, property rights." He cleared his throat. "Oh, you didn't mention you were doing that." "I didn't need to." "Well, sure, but I mean, Laura and I are here to help with all that, if you need. It affects us too, doesn't it?" "No," I said, steady. "It doesn't." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, I just don't want you making decisions without talking to us. You know, sometimes things can get confusing." "I'm not confused, David. I've never been clearer in my life." He sighed. "All right. If you ever want to go over the documents together." "I won't." Click. That evening, Laura served salmon with a quinoa salad. She said nothing about the bank, but I noticed her glance at me more than once, her smile too tight, her voice too pleasant. "Did Ava say when she's coming over next?" I asked, cutting into the fish. "She has midterms," David said quickly. "Might be a few weeks." "She texted me this morning," I said. "She'll be here Thursday." They both froze for a fraction of a second. "Oh," Laura said, laughing too lightly. "She's so busy these days." "She makes time," I said. "She always has." Later, I sat in my armchair by the window, the house soft around me, the last light of evening casting long shadows on the rug. Tom picked out 30 years ago. The tea was cold in my cup, but I didn't mind. I had done everything properly, quietly, legally. There were no confrontations, no screaming matches, no slammed doors, just ink, paper, proof. They didn't have to know yet. But when they did, it would already be done. And I wouldn't owe them a single explanation. They always forgot how sound carried in this house. It was built in 1932, before insulation, before double-pane windows, before modern walls could trap voices where they belonged. That's why I never talked on the phone upstairs. Tom used to joke you could hear someone blink from the next room. That was an exaggeration, but not by much. I was folding laundry in the guest room, what used to be David's room, before Laura painted it over in eggshell serenity and replaced the furniture with sleek, uncomfortable pieces from catalogs. The window stuck in the frame, just like it had when he was 10. I'd meant to fix it for years. Their voices floated up from the kitchen below. "I just think we need to set a date," Laura said. Her tone wasn't angry, just firm, managerial, the way she spoke to waiters and delivery men. "A date for what?" David asked, though he already knew. "For moving her. You said after the holidays. That was 5 months ago." There was a pause. Then the scrape of a chair. "She's not ready," David said. "She's never going to be ready, David," Laura snapped. She's content to just sit there, collecting dust and writing in those little notebooks like she's running a war diary. Meanwhile, we're living in limbo. The market's shifting. We need to move. She's not going to sign anything, he said, his voice quieter. You saw her after the bank. She's locking things down. It's like, I don't know. She's preparing for something. She's preparing to cling to this house until we bury her, Laura said. A silence followed. I could hear the refrigerator hum, a spoon tapping a cup. I'm not saying we push her, Laura continued, softer now. But there are ways to guide people. We can start showing her how nice those communities are. Maybe bring brochures. Take her on a tour. Ava could go too. She listens to Ava. She wouldn't like that. She doesn't like anything I do, Laura said, her voice sharpening. I've tried, David. God knows I've tried. I cook. I clean. I let her have the master bedroom. Let me. She doesn't ask for anything, David said. That's the thing. I keep waiting for her to need help so we have a reason. You know what she needs? Laura said. She needs clarity. She needs boundaries. And you need to stop playing the guilt card just because your dad died when you were in college. You didn't kill him. But if we let her run the show, she'll kill this house. There was a long pause. I heard footsteps. The fridge opened and closed. She can't take it with her, David, Laura said. The house, the land, it's too much for one old woman. At some point, we need to make adult decisions. Together. She'll hate us. She'll get over it. The conversation shifted after that. Laura started talking about open house dates, possibilities for renovations. David asked about kitchen permits. They thought they were whispering. I stood still for a long time. My hands were cold, a half-folded towel hanging over my arm. I didn't feel sad. Not anymore. That part had passed. This wasn't about care. It wasn't about safety or stairs or community living. It was about possession, space, legacy. And they thought they were the rightful heirs, by default, by biology, by the slow, quiet erosion of my presence. But I hadn't eroded. I walked downstairs 15 minutes later, laundry basket in hand, face composed. Laura was at the counter, flipping through a glossy magazine filled with kitchen designs. David sat beside her, reading something on his phone. They looked up at me with that false cheerfulness people wear when they're hiding a secret they think you're too fragile to hear. I'm making a roast tonight, Laura said brightly. I know you like that. Lovely, I said. Let me know if you want me to set the table. She blinked, thrown off. No, you just relax. I've been relaxing for years, I said. It's time I pulled my weight. I moved to the pantry and retrieved the good plates. Tom's plates, the ones we'd bought in Charleston when we thought we'd be newlyweds forever. I set the table slowly, deliberately, placing each fork and glass with care. By the time dinner was ready, everything gleamed. We ate in silence at first. Roast beef, potatoes, wine. Laura filled the space with empty stories about a neighbor's renovation. David nodded along. Ava wasn't there that night. After the dishes were cleared, Laura poured herself another glass of wine. So, she said, too casually, we've been thinking. I looked at her. She smiled. Maybe sometime next week you and I could go visit that lakeside community, just to look. No pressure. I have appointments next week, I said. Oh, well, maybe the week after? I'm busy then too. David shifted in his chair. Mom, we're just trying to help you explore options. You've got a big place here, lots of maintenance. I've managed it for 40 years, I said. I think I can manage a little longer. Laura opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Not loudly, not rudely, just enough. "I appreciate the thought," I said. "Truly. But this is my home, and I'll be the one to decide when I'm done with it." A long silence followed. Then David gave a little laugh, awkward, uncertain. "Fair enough," he said. Laura sipped her wine, her eyes hard behind the glass. I cleared the plates. Later that night, alone in my room, I wrote Ava a short note. "Sweetheart, when you visit Thursday, I want to show you a few things. Important things. Bring that quiet confidence of yours. I'll need it. Grandma." I placed it in an envelope and left it on her usual seat at the kitchen table. I knew they'd see it. Let them wonder. Let them stew. They had their plans, and I had mine. The house had never been perfect. Not when we moved in. Not after the repairs. Not even now. But it was ours. I still remember the day Tom first walked me through it. Mid-May, 1973. The grass in the front yard was knee-high. The porch steps rotted straight through, and every window rattled in the breeze. The real estate agent had apologized twice before we even got to the second floor. But Tom grinned like he was looking at a cathedral. "It's ugly now," he said, kicking the baseboard gently, "but it's honest. You can work with honest." And work we did. We spent that summer with splinters in our hands and sawdust in our lungs. Tom re-leveled the floor in the back hallway himself, lying flat on the ground in the heat with a wrench in one hand and a cigarette dangling from his lip. I painted every room, twice, because I changed my mind halfway through. We fought over the color of the kitchen cabinets and made up over cherry pie. That was our rhythm. He did the heavy things, I did the lasting ones. When David was born, we brought him home to the room with the yellow walls. The crib was second-hand. The mattress, new. I remember standing in that doorway and watching Tom lean over, whisper something to the baby I couldn't hear. He looked so large, so certain. But of course, no one's ever really certain. When David turned 4, Tom built him a sandbox out back. The frame was crooked, and the sand smelled of fresh pine, and the neighborhood kids all gathered in it like bees. Later that summer, when one of them pushed David too hard and he scraped his knee, Tom sat him down on the porch steps and said, "A man isn't made by how clean he stays. He's made by how fast he gets up." David nodded, biting his lip. He used to listen to his father like every word mattered. I think about that now more than I care to admit. About how boys become men, about what gets passed down and what quietly gets dropped. Tom passed away in 2001. A heart attack. Quick. Ugly. It took the air out of the house for a while. David had just graduated, full of plans, but he came home for the funeral and stayed for 3 months. We didn't talk about much during that time, just practical things, utilities, closing accounts, garden upkeep. One afternoon, I found him in the garage, sitting on the old workbench. He held one of Tom's hammers in his hand. "I can't fix things like he did," he said quietly. "I don't know how." "You don't have to fix everything," I said. "You just have to care about what breaks." He didn't answer, just kept turning the hammer in his palm. Later, he left. Moved into an apartment with a friend from college. Got a job in insurance. Met Laura. Married her in a hotel ballroom with cold salmon and 7 floral centerpieces. It was a lovely day, I suppose. Everyone smiled for the pictures. He never came back to the garage. Over the years, I mailed them checks. For the car, for the wedding, for the down payment on their first condo. When Laura wanted to start her own design business, I co-signed a loan. I told myself it was love. That's what love does, it gives. But I think I was also trying to keep something alive, a thread between us, something softer than obligation. Now, walking through this house alone, I see all of it layered together, grief and growth, effort and neglect. The paint in the hallway has begun to peel again. The tiles in the upstairs bathroom have a crack. The faucet in the guest room drips twice an hour, sharp and regular. I keep meaning to fix it. But sometimes, I think I leave it on purpose. Proof that things are still moving, that time hasn't stopped. That afternoon, I pulled the photo albums from the shelf. I hadn't opened them in a while. Not because it hurt. No, not anymore. But because I wasn't sure anyone remembered the people in them besides me. Tom in the garden with a shovel and a wide grin. David at 6, holding a frog by the pond, one shoe missing. A birthday party in the backyard, plastic cups, sun-faded balloons, my sister holding the camera crooked. In one photo, I'm standing on the porch with a bowl of potato salad. Tom's behind me, pretending to steal a bite with a wooden spoon. Our shoulders touch. His smile is slightly crooked, like he never quite believed he deserved to be that happy. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I took out a clean envelope and slid the photo inside. On the front, I wrote in firm, clear letters. Ava. She deserved to see it. To see who we were before the edges wore down, before the house became a battleground, before kindness got confused with silence. I placed the envelope with the others, legal documents, deeds, letters Tom had written but never sent. A story, piece by piece. When Ava came Thursday, I would show her everything, not to burden her, but to make sure someone knew how to carry it. Because memory, like land, only stays yours if you tend it. The day started quietly. Ava came in the morning, her backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes a little tired but warm, as always. We sat at the kitchen table, drank cocoa, and went over her math homework, though we both knew that wasn't the real reason she'd come. When the clock hit 11, I stood, went to the sideboard, and took out the folder. She looked at me, curious but silent. I set it in front of her. "Read the top page," I said. She scanned it, then blinked. "Wait, this is a land trust?" "Yes." "And it's in your name?" "Yes." She looked at me slowly. "Grandma, how much is this worth?" I didn't answer right away. I let her sit with the weight of it. "Enough," I finally said. "Enough for them to want it, and enough for me to decide exactly where it goes." Her eyes filled. "Is this why Mom keeps talking about assisted living? Downsizing?" "It's part of it," I said gently. "And part of it is they've never quite forgiven me for staying upright. People like things that fold. I didn't." She closed the folder carefully. Her hands were trembling. "Thank you for trusting me." "There's no one else I would," I said. "And don't worry. Nothing's changing yet. I'm still here." For a while. She reached across the table and held my hand for a long moment. By 1 o'clock, she'd gone. Back to school, back to her life. And the house returned to its usual hum. Laura came home at 2, arms full of bags, her perfume arriving a second before she did. She set everything on the kitchen island with a little huff. "Just picked up a few things," she said, not looking at me. "New table runner, some paint swatches, thinking of refreshing the front room." I said nothing. She unpacked slowly, narrating each item like it mattered. "This blue might brighten the space. The taupe's safe, of course, but I think we're past safe, don't you?" "We?" I said. She looked up. "David and I," she clarified. "We just want the house to feel more intentional." "Interesting word?" She gave a little laugh. Well, right now, it's all very lived in, which is lovely, but it doesn't really speak to who we are now. Who is that? I asked. She paused. Young professionals, a modern family, people with plans. And I suppose I don't fit that plan? I didn't say that, she said quickly, smile still plastered. But let's be honest. When people come over, they don't exactly assume you're the owner. I looked at her. She didn't flinch. You've said a lot of things to me over the years, Laura, I said quietly. Some sharp, some petty. But that one, I leaned forward slightly. That one's the first that's truly stupid. She blinked. This house was bought before you were born, I said. Paid for in cash, renovated by hand, maintained with sacrifice. Its plumbing carries the sound of my husband's laughter, and its attic holds pieces of my son's childhood. Every floorboard you call dated was scrubbed by these hands. And if I don't look like the owner to your friends, that's only because you've confused taste with memory. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. I've let a lot slide, I continued, because I thought patience might teach you something. I see now it didn't. So let me say it plainly. This is my house, not yours, not David's. Mine. And if you want to repaint anything, you'll need my written permission. Silence. Then finally she laughed, short and bitter. You know what? Fine. But don't be surprised if you wake up one day and realize how lonely this all is. I stood. I'd rather be alone in a house I love, I said, than surrounded by people who treat me like a placeholder. She stared at me, chest rising and falling. David's not going to like this. David, I said, hasn't liked a lot of things. He'll manage. I left the kitchen without another word. My knees ached from standing, but my back had never been straighter. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the rage to come. But it didn't. Only something colder, something clearer. That line, "You don't look like the owner," had burned through me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was said with such ease. She believed it. She believed she could erase 40 years with paint samples and entitlement. But names on deeds don't smudge that easily. And silence is not the same as surrender. Later, as I made tea, I heard her on the phone. Not whispering this time. She's getting defiant, she said. I think we need to accelerate the plan. Talk to that realtor again. If we push gently, she'll cave. She always does. I stirred sugar into the cup. Slowly, calmly. Let her plan. Let her call. Let her walk this house like she already owns it. Because soon, very soon, she'd learn what real ownership feels like. She was in my room when I came back from the garden. I hadn't been gone long, 20 minutes, maybe less. Just enough time to deadhead the roses and bring in a few sprigs of lavender. The front door was ajar when I stepped inside, which was strange. Laura never left doors open. It lets the dust in, she used to say. Dust, as if it were a deliberate intruder and not just the breath of old houses. I set the lavender on the kitchen counter and listened. Nothing. Then, movement upstairs, soft, controlled. I climbed the steps slowly, deliberately, not bothering to hide my footsteps. I wanted her to hear me, wanted her to know I was coming. If she was going to be caught, I wanted her to feel it. The door to my bedroom was half closed. I pushed it open with the side of my hand. She stood by the dresser, holding the envelope. Not the safe copy. The one I'd left for Ava, addressed in my handwriting, sealed but unhidden. Sitting on the edge of the table where she always sat. In plain sight. Laura had opened it. She didn't look up when I entered. I thought it was a recipe, she said, voice flat. I said nothing. I was going to leave it on the fridge for her, like a note or something. Still, I said nothing. She turned slowly, envelope still in hand, face pale and unreadable. You've signed everything over, she said. To Ava. I nodded once. You created a trust. Put the land in it. Took David out of the will. You didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. Her hands trembled slightly, and she placed the envelope back on the table as if it burned. She wasn't crying. That would have been easier to respond to. No. Her face held something quieter, a calculation that didn't add up. You think she'll know what to do with it? She said. You think she'll be grateful? I think she'll remember where it came from. She sat on the edge of the bed, not looking at me. For years, she said, I've tried to hold everything together. David's career, the bills, the house, this house, the family. You just sit here like gravity, refusing to move. You've mistaken stillness for weakness. No, she snapped, suddenly sharp. I mistook kindness for cooperation. We were silent for a long time. Then she laughed, just once. Bitter, small. You know what I thought? She said, not waiting for an answer. I thought this would be clean. I thought, when the time came, you'd pass the torch. Gracefully. That's what old women do, isn't it? They step aside. They make room. I crossed the room and picked up the envelope, slid the photo back inside, sealed it again. I'm not a hallway light to be turned off, I said. I'm not a chair to be donated. I'm still breathing, still choosing, still here. Laura looked up at me, eyes suddenly glassy. He's going to be so angry, she whispered. I sat beside her slowly, the mattress dipping under our weight. Probably, I said, but not surprised. I raised him better than that. He just forgot. She blinked fast, like she was willing herself not to feel anything. You hate me, she said quietly. No, I said. I don't hate you. I just don't owe you. She looked away. I spent years thinking this place was a stepping stone, she said. Something to manage, update, polish. I didn't know it was an anchor. It's both, I said. But you were always trying to sell the stone. For the first time, she didn't argue. Eventually, she stood, brushed invisible dust from her skirt, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused. You've made your choice. Yes, I said. She nodded, then left. I sat in the quiet afterward, hands folded in my lap. The envelope still lay beside me, intact again. The air smelled of lavender and something else, like the crackle of paper just before it catches fire. I wasn't proud of what had just happened, but I wasn't ashamed either. It wasn't victory. It was clarity. Some truths need to be spoken aloud. Others need only be written, signed, and witnessed. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. David came home later than usual that evening. His car pulled into the driveway just after sunset. I heard the tires on the gravel, the slight scrape of his briefcase across the passenger seat. For a while, he sat in the car without coming in, headlights still on, casting long shadows across the porch. When he finally stepped inside, the air shifted. I was in the den, knitting without thinking, unraveling and starting again. I'd done the same row 3 times. My hands needed motion. My mind needed stillness. He came in without taking off his coat. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded toward the chair across from mine. Sit. He did, slowly, as if unsure what version of me he'd meet. I talked to Laura, he said. I figured. She told me what you did. Also figured. He looked down at his hands, rubbing his wedding band. You put everything in Ava's name. In a trust, yes. After I'm gone. He was quiet for a moment. Then, why? I set the needles down, folded my hands, not angry, not defensive. Because she listens. He blinked. I listen. Not to me, I said gently. To Laura, to expectations, to the pace of things. You listen to what makes sense on paper. She's my wife. And I'm your mother, I said. I carried you, fed you, taught you how to tie your shoes and how to keep your temper in a room full of people. I taught you to say thank you. And you did. For years. Until somewhere along the line, you stopped seeing me as someone who still had choices. He shook his head. That's not fair. No, I said. It's just true. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You could have talked to me about all this. I tried, I said. In small ways, for years. I mentioned repairs. I brought up the land. I asked what you remembered about the backyard. You changed the subject every time. Because I didn't want to think about losing you, he said, voice quieter now. That's why I didn't want to talk about trusts or deeds. I didn't want to act like you were already gone. I looked at him then. Really looked. The gray in his hair, the heaviness in his shoulders. The boy I raised was still there, just buried under years of forward motion. It's not about losing me, I said. It's about what happens after. And I've lived long enough to know that if I don't name things while I'm here, they'll be rewritten when I'm not. He sat back, eyes glassy. You think I'd take it from her, he said. I think you wouldn't fight Laura. He didn't argue. You want to know the truth, I said. I didn't do this to punish you. I did it to protect her. Ava is the only one who's asked me what I want. Not what's best, not what's easier, not what's next. Just what I want. He nodded slowly. I would have helped you, he said, if you'd asked. But I didn't want help, I said. I wanted respect. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that settles between people when something big has just passed through the room. Finally, he stood. So that's it, he said. Nothing comes to me. I didn't say that, I replied. You'll still have pieces, small ones, photos, letters, a few things that mattered. But not the land, not the house. He swallowed. You don't trust me. I trust the part of you that still remembers who built this house, not the part that let it become a strategy. He looked away. I'm sorry, he said. I really thought I was doing the right thing. I know, I said. That's what makes it harder. He walked to the doorway, hand resting on the frame. Will you tell her? He asked. Ava? No. Laura. I shook my head. She already knows. But it's not her I needed to tell. He nodded once, then left. I stayed in the chair long after the door clicked shut. Outside, the porch light flickered on. The wind picked up. I picked up the needles again and began the row for the fourth time. This time, I didn't unravel it. They left on a Saturday. No bags at first. Just a coat slung over David's arm and Laura's purse swinging with purpose. The kind of exit that says we'll be back when we've decided how we feel. No goodbyes. No explanation. David mumbled something about needing space. Laura didn't speak at all. I stood by the window as their car backed out of the driveway, tires crunching the gravel like brittle bones. The taillights blinked red twice, then vanished down the road. It was quiet after that. Not the strained quiet of tension or waiting, but a clean, breathable quiet, like the house had finally exhaled. I made myself a cup of tea. The good kind, with loose leaves and boiled water and a bit of honey from the jar Ava gave me last Christmas. I carried it out to the porch and sat in Tom's chair, the one that creaked a little but held just right. The sky was overcast, but not unfriendly. Autumn sat on the air, not quite cold, not quite gone. The porch boards needed resealing. I ran my hand along the rail and felt the rough spots, the splinters lifting where the sun had baked through the varnish. I made a note to sand it next week. Out front, the roses had taken on that dusky color they get before falling apart completely. Still proud, still upright, even as the petals loosened. I fetched the shears from the shed and trimmed them back, talking to them softly as I worked. "You did good this year," I said. "Time to rest now." Inside, I dusted the bookshelf in the study, rearranged the photo frames so Tom's didn't tilt to the left. I straightened the old quilt on the guest bed, made sure the edge was tucked just so. I cleaned the silverware drawer, refolded the linen napkins. I wasn't tidying because they'd left. I was tending. There's a difference. In the afternoon, I pulled out the recipe box and chose one of the cards at random. Apple spice cake, Tom's favorite. I'd made it so many times I could do it with my eyes closed, but I read the card anyway. His handwriting on the top corner, "Don't skimp on the nutmeg." I never did. The house filled with the smell of cinnamon and warm sugar, and for a moment it didn't matter who had tried to redesign it or repaint it or plan for its next owner. It was still mine. Later, I opened the closet in the hall and took out the metal tin where I kept the old keys. Some of them didn't fit anything anymore. The lock on the garage that rusted shut in '98, the trunk Tom lost the combination to, the padlock from David's high school locker. I added one more, the key to the safe. Not because I no longer needed it, but because it was time it lived with the others. Time it became part of the house's memory, not just its protection. At sunset, I made soup. The kind that simmers slow and long and smells like patience. I ate alone at the kitchen table. No one asked what was in it. No one picked at the bread or complained it needed salt. When I was done, I washed the dishes by hand. Not because the dishwasher was broken, because I like the way hot water feels on my fingers when the day is finished. Before bed, I walked the perimeter of the house, checked the locks, turned off the porch light, ran my hand along the wall as I moved from room to room. Not to steady myself, to say goodnight. And when I climbed into bed, I didn't think about Laura or David or what came next. I thought about how the boards creaked in just the same way they had the day we moved in. How the wind still pushed the same branch against the window in October. How memory, when kept right, doesn't fade. It roots. This was not a house waiting for new owners. This was a home already full. Ava came on a Thursday just after 3. School let out early for some district-wide training, and she showed up in jeans and an old sweatshirt, hair damp from the rain, cheeks pink from the cold. She didn't knock. She never did anymore. Just let herself in and called softly, "Grandma?" "In the kitchen," I said. She walked in and dropped her bag with a sigh, like the weight of everything outside stopped at the threshold of this house. She looked tired, not physically, but in the way young people get when they're beginning to understand that the world isn't fair and maybe never was. I poured her tea without asking. She didn't smile this time, just wrapped her hands around the mug and stared into it like it might explain something. "They're not speaking to me," she said after a while. "Mom barely looks up from her phone when I come home. Dad asked if I knew what I was doing. Like I had to be tricked into loving you." I didn't respond, not right away. She looked up. "Did I do the wrong thing?" "No," I said. You stood still when it mattered. That's not wrong. It's just rare." She bit her lip and looked down again. I reached into the side drawer, pulled out a small velvet pouch, and set it on the table. Inside were 3 keys. I didn't say what they were for. She already knew. Ava stared at them. "Now?" "No rush," I said. "But someday, someone will tell you you don't look like the kind of person who owns a house like this, or land like this, or memory like this." She looked at me. "And I want you to know," I continued, "that you don't have to match anything. Not their version of success or ownership or legacy. You only have to remember where you came from, what this place cost, what it gave." She swallowed. "Will I be able to keep it?" "The land is locked in trust," I said. "Nobody can touch it without your say. The house will pass to you when the time comes. The money's in place. Everything's prepared." "But the rest?" she asked. "The people?" I exhaled slowly. "That part's harder." She nodded. "Your father. He isn't cruel, just comfortable. Comfort can make people lazy, and lazy people let loud voices speak for them." "I don't want to hate them," she whispered. "Then don't," I said. "Just know what's yours, and don't hand it away because someone else makes you doubt it." She was quiet a long time. Then, very gently, she reached out and touched my hand. "You're not going anywhere soon," she said, not asking. I smiled. "I still have soup in the freezer." She laughed softly. "I'm not ready. You don't have to be. Just pay attention." She put the keys in her pocket like they were fragile, not afraid they'd break, afraid she might. We sat a while longer, saying very little. The rain tapped against the windows, soft and steady. The house didn't creak that day. It just held us, quiet and warm. Before she left, I handed her a folder. Just one. The one with the map. It had the original parcel drawings, the notes Tom had made on setbacks and soil quality, the hand-sketched plans he never showed anyone. She opened it and touched the paper like it was alive. "He would have liked you," I said. "You don't talk just to fill the air." She nodded, eyes glossy. "I would have liked him too." I walked her to the door, helped her with her coat, pressed a sandwich into her hands even though she insisted she wasn't hungry. When she turned to go, I didn't watch her leave right away. I just stood there, hand still on the doorknob, and felt the strange peace of something finally done right. Let them wonder where it all went. Let them redraw the maps in their heads. The future was never meant to belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the one who listens and stays. The trees turned gold the following week. I watched them from the porch each morning, coffee cooling in my hands, the light slow to rise. The house didn't change, but the way it felt under my feet did. Not lighter, exactly, just settled. Like something long overdue had finally stopped asking for permission. David called once. I let it ring. Laura didn't call at all. They didn't come back. Not that week, not the next. And that was fine. I didn't need noise. I didn't need apologies dressed up as concern. I needed exactly what I had. Quiet, clean air, and a granddaughter who understood how to listen without trying to fix. Ava came twice more. Once to bring groceries. Once just to sit. We didn't talk much the second time. She read on the sofa while I cleaned out the drawer with the old birthday cards and expired coupons. I let her keep one of Tom's pocket knives, the one he used to carry when he thought every problem could be solved with a blade and a bit of tape. She opened it carefully, like a memory. "Is this mine now?" she asked. "Only if you lose it at least once and find it again," I said. She smiled. We didn't talk about the land, or the house, or what might come. Some things don't need repeating. That Friday, I baked 2 loaves of bread, one for me, one for the neighbor down the street who still swears I taught her daughter to ride a bike, though I don't remember doing it. Maybe I did. We do a lot more for people than they notice. I left the second loaf on her doorstep with a note. Still here. Still baking. Later, I cleaned the windows on the south side. Took down the curtains. Let the light in. It's strange, after so many years, to feel like something is finally yours, even when it's been in your name the whole time. But that's how it felt now. Not like ownership, but presence. Not like control, but clarity. This house is not a monument. It is not a prize. It is a vessel. It held us when we were loud, when we were wrong, when we forgot what mattered. It still does. There will be more seasons, more arguments, more shifts in the weather. But the center holds. Because I'm not just someone who stayed. I'm someone who remembered. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been talked over, packed away, treated like a chapter instead of a whole book, then I hope you remember too. You are not done just because they're tired of your presence. You are not invisible just because they want the room. You are still here. Say it if you need to. Write it down. Tape it to the fridge. Still here, still mine, still choosing. If this story held your hand, even for a moment, share it. Send it. Let someone else remember too.